Lord Razzle.
Yes, I'd like to turn to the slightly thorny issue of the introduction of the rise in employers' national insurance contributions, which, as you know, has subsequently proved a bit controversial. I'm interested in what you think about the impact on employment, inflation. Obviously, the bigger companies are better organised to absorb this, although I think if you went into your local pub, if you had the time to, you'd find that the local pub, if it was still there, was complaining to you about the impact on it. Did the Treasury model the affected changes before you introduced that? And if so, what was the predicted effect?
Thank you very much for your question, Lord Razzle. So when we came to office last year, and sort of links to the question earlier on from Lord Turnbull, we did face a situation where there were a number of unfunded spending commitments, and we needed to explain how we were going to pay for them. There were choices about how to address that. We could have increased taxes on working people. We could have cut public spending.
Lord Russell asks a very straightforward question. Did you model the impact of increasing national insurance contributions before doing so? It's a very simple question, isn't it? Small businesses, pub owners, tradespeople, people are suffering. Reeves's answer? Well, we increased taxes because we had no other choice. Sorry, but that's not an answer. It's an evasion. It's the same game played out time and time again in Britain. There's a budget deficit, there's debt, so you pay. Always us. Never the thick salaried politicians in Westminster. Don't you agree? Don't forget to like before moving on to the video.
I didn't think that they were the right choices, and so as a result we did increase taxes on business and on the wealthiest in society by around £40 billion in the budget last year, and around just under 25 billion of that came from an increase in employer national insurance contributions. Now, recognising, as you say, that smaller businesses would struggle more with that, we increased the employment allowance to £10,500. So if you're employing the equivalent of 4 people on the national living wage, you wouldn't be paying any national insurance contributions at all. That was a doubling of the employment allowance. It means around 1 million businesses are paying either less or no more national insurance than what they were previously. But of course, on bigger businesses, especially employment-heavy businesses, do face or have faced an increase in that burden. But the counterfactual would have been either higher taxes on working people who have already had to absorb, the vast amount of the cost of living challenges. It would have meant cuts in public services that had already been starved of resources for many years under the austerity of the previous government, or it would have meant more borrowing, which I just don't think would be the right approach, and would have meant that the Bank of England weren't able to cut interest rates by 4 times in the last year. And of course, those lower interest rates benefit both households, especially with mortgages or other lending, and also help businesses who have also paid a heavy price for the sharp increase in interest rates that we've seen over the last few years. So that money that we raised, including the national insurance contributions, we used to put our public finances on a firm footing, and also enabled us to put that additional money, £29 billion extra a year, into the National Health Service. So they were the right decisions in the circumstances that we faced, and I continue to defend those. The modelling by the Office of Budget Responsibility, I think, should be the place to go to look for the impact of policies. But you can't, in my view, look at individual policies on their own. You have to look at what the alternatives were, and I think the alternatives would have been an awful lot worse.
Yes, well, I don't want to get into a debate about that. I don't necessarily agree with you. So what you're saying is the Treasury didn't model the effect of this, particularly in the hospitality sector, but the OBR may well.
I'd just also say this. I've set out my policies and what this government are doing, and of course people can disagree, but then the onus on them is to say, well, what would you do? Because if you're facing a situation where you've got a lot of unfunded spending commitments, you could say, okay, fine, well, we won't do that spending. That's definitely a reasonable thing to say, and then you wouldn't have to increase the taxes. Or you could say, well, I want to pay for those public services that have been promised, in which case you can either borrow to fund that, and therefore you wouldn't have benefited, I don't believe, from the cuts in interest rates, and we would have paid higher costs of government borrowing. Or you could say, well, tax someone else. Well, that's fine, but you have to say who. But you can't support the increase in public spending unless you support the money to pay for it. And if you don't support the increase in public spending, that's fine, but you have to justify why you would not be putting in the additional £29 billion into the health service.
We would have increased the bank levy, increased the tax on the technology companies, and taxed the gambling companies. So you could have got close to 40 million in that, but now it's not the time to debate.
I mean, we could discuss that another time, but it is maths like that got us into the problems that we're in today.
Rachel Reeves says, but look, we've made things easier for small businesses. Yeah, what difference does that make to a pub owner? The man's beer kegs are already coming in at a premium, his energy bills are sky high, it's hard to find staff, now you're slapping taxes on top of that. Then you say, but our alternative was to tax workers. How clever is that? Pit the people against each other, as if no one else is paying. Tell me, has Reeves really found a solution, or is she just muddling through? The funniest part is Reeves's statement, but interest rates have fallen 4 times. As if the Bank of England makes decisions based on Reeves's coffee grounds. Interest rates are tied to global economic waves. The government doesn't have a simple button to press that says raise taxes, lower interest rates. This explanation is the usual childish deception. Remember, Starmer always does the same thing. First he takes advantage of a crisis, then he says, but look, it would have been worse if it weren't, for us. There's never a success story. It's always a tale of escaping something worse. Do you believe these stories? Lord Russell was actually very polite. He could have asked a tougher question. Have you ever been to a pub and paid for a pint, Rachel? That would have caused an uproar. Reeves, meanwhile, passes the buck to the OBR, Office for Budget Responsibility. Ask them. They modelled it. So the government makes the decision, but you'll ask someone else to account for it? A very British comedy scene. I did it, but someone else should investigate. Friends, you're the pub owner. You're paying the bill, not Reeves. Is that fair? Then there's the, we gave £29 billion to the NHS line. I'm sick of hearing that sentence. For decades, every tax increase has been said to be going to the NHS. I ask you, is the NHS in good shape right now? Can you get an appointment? Hospitals are still in crisis, staff are still leaving. So where did this £29 billion go? What Reeves says sounds heroic, but in practice it's a blank check. Every government throughout history has said, for the NHS. But what's the result? We're still waiting in line. Do you really think the NHS saw this money? At its core, Reeves's argument is, the alternatives were worse. Friends, how is that politics? Let's say it could be worse, so put up with it. Doesn't this country deserve better? Do our children have to settle for less? Reeves and his team are saying either accept us or face chaos. That's political blackmail. We've seen it time and again in history. Starmer's Labour is doing the same thing, selling fear, not hope. What do you think? Is this really leadership? Finally, Reeves's line, you tell me which tax would you raise, is classic Labour thinking. Always shift the blame onto someone else. We want the government to solve problems, not make us solve questions like an exam paper. Reeves isn't concerned with solutions, just excuses. That's why people are turning away from politics. What do you think, friends? Do you think Rachel Reeves is being sincere here, or is she just playing politics? Write your comments. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.